So one of the things that I want to run by you and talk about. So when I'm showing property people from out of the area, a lot of times we'll look out in the county and they say, oh, I don't have to pay city taxes. And my response always is, well, you don't pay city taxes, but you don't get city services. Right. So tell me what I'm saying, and I know what I'm saying, but when I say that, what does that mean to you as far as?
So, when you look at the cities across the county, first and foremost, whether you're inside a city limit or outside a city limit, you're a county resident.
Right.
First. From that, you're then a county resident living inside the city of Kingsport, which then also makes you a city resident. So you're paying a county property tax, you're paying a city property tax. County property tax affords you and affords everybody in the county, whether you're inside the city or out, the basic services that a county would provide. City tax on top of that then goes towards education, goes towards parks, goes towards an accredited police department, accredited fire department. In addition to that, there's senior citizen, or senior center, right. Those services that are there, access to public transportation. And so it's a very, and a lot of people will say that to even us, hey, I love the region, but I don't want to pay the city and the county taxes. Right. And it's really, it boils down to a choice, and it boils down to, do you want to have access to these other services? And do you want to have that through means of paying that property tax? And so we hear the same thing quite often, but oftentimes people like in addition to the services I mentioned, also the tighter zoning restrictions, right. Yes. Requirements that we have for neighborhood development, the density, the walkability. Those are things that you get inside of a city that not often in the county do you find.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, most of the people that are coming in, if you take the total property tax versus what they're used to paying.
Oh, yeah. It's not even close.
No, not even close.
Not even close. And I think what's also interesting when I talk to people who have moved in here to the region, they do not see city and county boundaries. It's really, it's somewhat fascinating to me. I was talking to a guy who's opened up a business here in Kingsport a couple of months ago, and I said, well, you live in Kingsport? And he said, no, I live in Washington County. Well, that's kind of where I'm from, so we kind of struck up a conversation of whereabouts, and talked about the distance, about a 35-minute drive, and he's like, from where I came from, 35 minutes was like going around the block or something to us. For them, we think of 35 minutes like, oh, well, you're going to Johnson City, you're having to drive to Bristol or Rogersville. The folks moving in, they don't think anything about it. And they see themselves living in Northeast Tennessee, right, or Southwest Virginia, not Sullivan County, Kingsport, Sullivan County, Bristol, Washington County, Johnson City. So that's been a different perspective, and one that has been very interesting as we interact with these people, and especially when we're doing recruitment and we're talking about all the benefits of living inside the city and all the things that you can get with that, and it's a totally different view.
So as far as the city and your thoughts about the future and development and things like that, I know obviously for us, where we're located in our office, Main Street development's that's why I didn't ask you to come to our office today, because we don't know where we'd park. But obviously that's a long-term benefit. In the short term, obviously there's mess and everything. But talk about that and any other projects maybe that you're looking at for development.
So I came to the city of Kingsport in October of 1997. Okay. And we were talking about the need to rebuild Main Street then.
Right.
And the reason we were talking about it is because that into Main Street, Wilcox, all the way out to Meadowview and Interstate 26, it was never intended in all the design that was done of Kingsport to be the front door.
The gateway, right.
Yeah, it was always really in many ways the back door. That was where industry was. That was where Eastman was, the Domtar, AGC Glass, all of that was back there.
Right.
Your primary entrances were Fort Henry Drive.
Yes.
Memorial Boulevard, Stone Drive. That was how you came into the city. And so as you look at those areas, that's reflective in the design, the zoning, and everything that takes place there. So the realization that now through the interstate,
Right.
number one, Metaview, number
26,
two,
yeah.
all of the things that we had there, we had to change that corridor. And so we had to take Main Street that really is kind of, it has two heads in some ways. You have your traditional Main Street with the brick sidewalks, the
Right.
facades, the train station, and then you have this other section which is very much like an industrial park, and that's what ties into Sullivan and then ultimately to Wilcox. And so that was the section that we really had to focus a lot of effort on. And then the other part is the next phase of this, all under this current contract though, will be less invasive, but still it will be the goal of trying to enhance that. And what that does, every single time there is a significant public improvement, such as streetscape and the rebuild of a street, you're able to then see private reinvestment back into that. And so as we see more people having a desire to be downtown, to live downtown, to work, to shop, to eat, we recognize the need to invest more into the public infrastructure that is there. And so Main Street is a critical component of that entire thing that we have been looking at since 1997. And one of the things that we often find though, when you look at public investments in our downtown, we have a massive downtown. You know, it is, when you compare it to surrounding cities, they're looking at 3 or 4 blocks,
Right.
potentially. You know, we're nearly 50 blocks within our downtown, and so it is a large area. So your ability to, you have to really strategically look at how you make those improvements.
Now, how will the Brickyard tie into Main Street? Because it seems to me like that's kind of, they're two separate projects, but they're kind of blending together, I guess, when they come to the end.
They are, and that too is by design. You know, we have often said a lot of cities would love to have 100 acres of vacant land adjacent to their downtown, and for us to convert that into residential really was something that was kind of going against the grain. The thought was you have rail access, you have access to a 4-lane highway, to a state route and an industry drive. My goodness, why would you not try to find some industrial component? But the thought was, well, if we add residential development there and we can connect it to downtown, there's probably not a greater economic impact to your downtown than to put feet on the street, and to do so by adding that many housing units basically downtown. So almost overnight, which we realize it'll take time to build out, but you then find yourself as becoming one of the most populated downtowns within Northeast Tennessee. And so that was a very strategic goal of ours. And the connection will be through a pedestrian bridge. Initially, we wanted to connect via road and tie that in that way. Conversations with CSX, concerns over an active rail yard and the number of times that would be closed due to trains parked and switching out and moving of cars. We came back and said, okay, we'll close it, but we want the pedestrian bridge. We were fortunate to get a state grant. It's going to cover probably 75% of that total cost, which is going to probably, when it's all said and done, be over $4 million. And so we are in that design phase right now. The permitting phase, which is lengthy when you get a state and federal grant such as this. So we are going through those steps right now. The goal for Main Street is hopefully be done late summer of '25, and the thought would be that the pedestrian bridge hopefully would begin coming up out of the ground shortly thereafter. And that ties into what we think Brickyard beginning probably sometime in the first phase, the latter part of this calendar year.
Okay. So the bridge will, I mean, obviously it'll physically tie those two projects together.
It will. It'll be that connection into our downtown.
Do you see like increase in interest now that things are moving as far as businesses outside, inside, you know, any investment, I guess, coming into that, to those developments?
Very much so. I mean, there is a tremendous amount of interest within downtown Kingsport. And so we're continuing to see businesses come in. I think this past year, the Downtown Kingsport Association saw a record number of new businesses open up. We also continue to see, as we move in through '24, interest in a variety of things from residential lofts to opening up new office space or new business space within downtown. In addition to that, we as a city continue to try to market key pieces of property. The parking lot on New Street, located kind of on the corner of New and Clay, was a piece of property we acquired when we acquired 415 Broad Street, which is our new city hall. It was part of that deal. It's a parking lot that is rarely used, and so we kind of see it's probably not at its highest potential. So we started having conversations with folks that might have an interest in putting a hotel downtown.
Always said, tourists, we love them. We like them to come because they pay our taxes.
Sure.
And we think that is very critical to the long-term success of downtown. Dobbins Taylor Warehouse is another historic piece of property that in the last year we've been able to develop a partnership with the Taylor family. We are in a position now to where we can begin marketing that, and we're beginning to see a lot of interest in that as well. And I think the other great thing too is just as we are seeing this new development take place in our downtown, we're also seeing redevelopment, and we're seeing redevelopment in the radial streets that sit behind Church Circle. And I was up there this fall. I haven't really walked those streets in quite a while. It's a Saturday morning. I was out walking, been to the farmers market, walked through there, and was really impressed with the redevelopment of some of those houses. And that's a unique style of architecture that we have in our city when you compare it to others. And a lot of it has to do with how young of a city we are.
Yeah,
but
really.
It's really a pretty neighborhood.
Well, and I think as you see, just in general, we've lived in different places, when you see government investing in their product, then the citizens then start to invest in their product. So one of the things, obviously, with my business is the lack of housing, the inventory, which is driving prices up, which there's a whole nother bag of problems when you have that. But what do you see as far as what is the city doing in trying to encourage single-family housing development?
So that is probably a conversation we have on a daily basis, and it really has been for the last probably 10 years. I know even when Jeff Fleming was city manager, and quite honestly when John Campbell was city manager, there was a lot of conversation about housing. Now there's increased conversation about housing, and it's all housing. When we talk about in years past, we might have been focusing in on a certain price point, or we might have been focusing in on multifamily. Today, we find the conversation centered around all housing. And so what we are trying to do is constantly look at what is in our toolbox in terms of what we can provide that might encourage or might be what takes a project from just being on the brink of being able to happen to getting it over the edge. And so one of the big things is obviously our materials agreement that we have, which allows for the water and sewer utilities to go in, that to be then reimbursed back to the developer, which is a huge cost savings there. But we're also beginning to look at other tools that I think the Board of Mayor and Aldermen will look at as we progress through this calendar year that might provide some additional options for development. One of the big things that we face in Kingsport is really a lack of available land. Look at a lot of other cities growing across the state. They've got some great land that they can grow into, whether that's in the city or in the county. And a lot of our good land has been developed on.
Right.
So infill development is an area that we're really beginning to see a lot of focus, and we've seen a lot of really unique developments over the last several years take advantage of that. And that doesn't mean we still don't have opportunities for the farm that once was to now be developed into single-family housing, but we're really seeing opportunities for redevelopment. And the great thing about that is when that occurs, it has a ripple effect within the area around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's great to see this injection of new development and then how that has such an impact on the properties around it. And we've seen some areas of our city that have been struggling and been struggling for decades.
Yeah.
and a new development comes in within proximity of that, and that ripple effect begins to take place. And so that's a positive thing. And so we're glad to see that, but we're also constantly trying to engage with builders within our city. We have a great relationship with the Home Builders Association. James Phillips, one of our aldermen, is the president of that. He's been, very much out front and pushing builders to the developers of the Brickyard project to say, hey, these are going to be available lots. How can we buy them? How can we get interest there? So at the end of the day, in order to meet those needs, it's a multitude of things, and it's really going to continue to be on the front burner.
So that was my next question, was like, how do you project that going into the future, that it's going to continue to be more and more increased?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do not see any let up. We continue to be a state that people want to be in. We continue to be a city that people have a desire to locate in. So all of those things, there's nothing out there that says it's going to, there's a cliff coming. Interest rates obviously slowed things down a little bit, but as you know more than anybody else, your available housing is very limited.
It's driving everything. And then we were talking about interest rates earlier today. I don't know, when you bought your first house, mine was 8.5%. I thought I was doing great.
Yeah.
So the buyers have become accustomed now to the new or higher rate, and it's settling. So that's really not, I think, overall market, in the United States, it's affecting it, but in our market, the demand is still too high. So it's not slowing down at all. So other things, I've talked about what I want to talk about. So other things that you're excited about in the city going forward?
Well, there's a lot. Obviously, we talked about downtown. That's been a focal point, really, the 27 years now that I've been with the city of Kingsport has been our downtown, and I think will continue to be our downtown. Economic development has taken a forefront over the last several years. Really a push by the community, a push by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to make that happen, and so we feel like we have stepped up and answered that. As we see population growth, with that comes demands for services. I remember presenting to the board when I was applying to be the city manager, and I said residential development is economic development 101. As we grow in population, as we see new residential development, we'll see a desire for other businesses to locate here, and we are seeing that. We're very excited about the Fort Henry Mall and the partnership that we've been able to develop with Hull Properties, who owns that mall. Even today, after the announcement of IMAX and the build out of the old JCPenney space and selling of out parcels, there continues to be interest in development there that the Hull property is working through. So,
which kind of goes against the rest of America when you talk about shopping malls.
It really does. I mean, you look at our sales tax every month, and you look at the percentage that is purchased online, and it is growing every single month. And I know that's one of the things that Jeff Fleming said years ago. He said, brick and mortar retail is going to change, or it's going to evolve over time to be completely different than what we've ever been accustomed to. And we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of the brick and mortar shopping centers and businesses be able to evolve to be able to meet both demands of those who are the walk up. And
well, my background,
right?
And so I can remember Sam Walton saying, he revolutionized big box.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm not in retail anymore, because I can see it going away. And he always said it will go back to what it was before me. And that was specialty shops. And that's really, just like the Rural King. That's a specialty shop. So it's going back to, I can get the everyday things wherever, but if I want that specific specialty item, I'm going to go there. And then also, we just interviewed or had the spotlight on the Crumb Bum.
Yeah.
I mean, that services business is really where it's at for locals, I think.
It is, and I think what we have seen in the really leading up to the pandemic, but especially after the pandemic, is the realization I can buy more online, but it's also we've seen a growth in small business to meet those specialty needs that they're not going to be able to find online or in a big box. Right. And so that's been good. So economic development has been on that forefront. Trying to reinvest back into many of our assets has been another one. Bays Mountain Park is a great example where a tremendous amount of both public but also private dollars are going back into that park to make some much needed upgrades, to add additional attractions. Not only is that a crown jewel for the city of Kingsport, but it is an attraction for this region, and it is one when you do a license plate scan or you look at the zip codes that we get, we're mapping this out all over the country. So that's a positive thing. We're also beginning to set our sights on building new schools, and as the growth continues within our education system, and as we see new housing coming in, and do these existing schools, are they able to meet that need? The realization is we're going to have to make some adjustments, modernize, and also probably look at consolidation in some areas. But it will still have, all of the components that have made Kingsport City Schools so great for so many years.
Well, I was going to say, you have a high bar.
You do.
And that's self-imposed, I think.
Absolutely
really.
It is.
I can remember before moving to Kingsport, Michael had been born, and I said, I don't know where we're going, but we're going to go to one of three places, and that was Maryville City, Oak Ridge City, or Kingsport City. Because in my opinion, based on my travels throughout East Tennessee, that was the three best school systems at that time. And so glad that our boys went through the school system here.
When you look at the history of the city of Kingsport and you look at all the things they were doing to recruit businesses, but also to recruit those employees that could help run those, education was one of the top three things that they had to have. And so what was good and what was needed 100 plus years ago is exactly where we find ourselves today. And education has been on the forefront of conversation in this state, and we continue to be one of those shining examples. And I think that's going to only continue, and I think that's why this opportunity to look at new facilities at the elementary level, to also refocus attention towards CTE, which has been a real huge and much needed initiative coming out of Nashville. We're going to continue to be able to build upon all those, develop great relationships with TCAT and Northeast State in order to see dual enrollment opportunities, which allows us to not duplicate our resources in those areas, utilize what they have. And I think too, when you look at schools, you also look at quality of life, and with that comes, we've inherited Sullivan North, the former Sullivan North, and we look at those athletic fields around that and the benefits it not only has to the school, but also to our rec leagues, and then potentially even tournaments that come in. So there's a lot of emphasis in those areas, and as I have always said to our board and what has been taught to me over the years that I've been here, while we are focusing on those shiny things, we are also focusing on the necessary things it takes to run a city. So the infrastructure, we are putting more money into resurfacing than we ever have. I think this year we will be knocking on the door of about $4 million of investment. In addition to that, we're focusing a lot of attention on our utilities. So water and sewer, stormwater, those are areas that, I don't care who you are, those are the fundamental foundations of managing a city. You want to get up every morning and be able to flush the commode and brush your teeth.
Yes.
And those are
those
vital.
Are necessary things.
Those are vital. And that's what has always been preached to me. You want to make sure those things are going. But those are capital intensive endeavors to meet the regulatory needs, to constantly be reinvesting into aging infrastructure, to keep it running smoothly. So we've never lost sight of that and continue to focus on that. And also with a growing city comes the need for more public safety. And so we are looking Recently had a presentation by our fire department about the rebuild of one of the oldest fire stations we have, which is Station 2 on Fort Henry Drive, but also looking out into the Airport Parkway area with Station number 9 as we see development occur out there. And then the need for more police officers. Our police chief recently presented to the board looking at the eventual hire of 10 new sworn officers to our probably 128, 129 sworn officers that we have currently budgeted now. So that pushes us up almost to 140 sworn officers. But that's necessary in order to manage the population growth, manage the annexation areas that we see. And so we continue to do all that with a focus also on the tax base and the dollars needed to make that happen.
I know one thing that was important to you a while back, and I wanted to check up and see how you felt like you were doing on it. Retention. I mean, you're running a business and you've got employees, and retention is always a huge thing. It is in our business too. So I know you've taken some steps in order to try to help that. How do you feel like you're doing in that?
You know, we feel like we're in a much better position than we were a few years ago. You know, coming out of the pandemic, we started to see salaries and hourly rates just jump off the chart. And government's ability to match in a timely fashion compared to the private sector is in some ways night and day. We are nimble. Local government's probably more nimble than any other form of government, but it was a challenge. And we saw quite a few individuals either choose to retire or take opportunities outside the city of Kingsport that were paying much more. It required a 12-cent tax increase to get us in a position to be competitive with wages. We presented that to the board. 100% of the 12 cents went towards pay and benefits, and so it allowed us to go in, right size, become really aligned with what the market was paying for our employees. That has had a huge impact in our ability to cut some of the exits that we were seeing.
Right.
But also adjustments to our benefit package was critical, and so we've gone in, we've opened up voluntary benefits, which has been a request for many, many years. We went back to the state retirement system, which we've been absent of for over 10 years, and those were things that began to then kind of calm down the exit and really also begin to attract people in. And so, yes, we have seen quite a bit of success in that. But I will tell you, it's the job market today is just as competitive. I saw a stat here the other day from our HR director that there's more vacancies in the state of Tennessee than there are people unemployed.
Wow.
And then you look at the labor participation rate for our area, and that is, you know, very much in an area that needs to be addressed for those who should be working that aren't working.
Right.
And so how do we get them engaged into the workforce? And then really just, I think, what is going to be required of City of Kingsport and quite honestly every local government in this state is we are going to constantly have to be looking at what the market is doing to be able to make sure we are competitive. Absent of that, you're going to get behind, and when you get behind,
well, and you already know your time to respond is greater based on the way you have to respond, you know,
Correct.
for approvals and everything else. So yeah,
Absolutely.
staying ahead of it
Yeah.
is very key. Anything else you want to share before we go?
I'll tell you what, we've pretty much covered the entire alphabet here, haven't we? In a short amount of time,
I know, right?
too.